Hi, my name is Chris Hardy, and I serve with Justice and Mercy International here in Nashville, Tennessee, as the Director of Programs and Church Partnerships. And I'm so honored to be joined by Pastor Mike Minter. Mike is the senior pastor at Reston Bible Church, just outside of DC. And Mike, I'm so honored that you're joining me on this brief video today.
I am honored to be here. I look forward to our time.
Amen. Me too. Now, Mike, you started Reston Bible Church in 1974 in a living room. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were invited, Kay and I were invited up to start a church in Reston. It didn't have an evangelical work. And the people that invited us let us use their house. So we had our very first meeting in June of 1974. Then we had our first church service in March of 75. So we just celebrated 45 years in an empty auditorium.
Wow, look at that. Now, you've probably seen quite a bit of changes taking place at Reston. You started small and now you're considered a mega church. Your thousands are coming to Reston on a regular basis.
Well, it's been an incredible journey. It's just been God's grace all the way through, and it's been an exciting journey. It hasn't been an easy journey, as all church work is, but it's been a very, very exciting one.
Sure, amen. Now, Reston is globally focused. I mean, you are a missions church. Tell us a little bit about that, Mike.
I knew nothing about missions until about 1977 or 78. A local pastor in our area, John Fletcher of Faith Bible Church, said, Mike, you've got to get involved in missions. You have to. It's God's major plan. And so we had our very first, I think our first gathering of inviting an outside speaker, I think from Dallas Seminary or someplace, to come and talk to us about missions. It was about 1978 timeframe. And we started a missions committee. I told these guys, go out and find out what missions is about and come back and tell me. So we had about 4 or 5 guys on a board, a couple of ladies, and we started from there and had the first year we brought in $5,000, and now we have a line item of $1.6 million a year that we automatically give to missions.
Wow. So literally $1.6 million goes out of Reston's door to the world.
Right.
To support missions.
Amen.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to get on this Zoom call with you, Mike, is because you're so globally focused. I wanted to really talk briefly about this whole crisis, the pandemic, and how this crisis is impacting our Great Commission call as a church. And how we as believers and local church leaders, how we respond when mission trips have been canceled. We can't leave the country. We're quarantined.
Right.
How do we help ourselves and our churches keep a global heart and not forget about the world and the least reached people groups of the world? How do we do that when we're quarantined? And how does all this impact the call from Scripture to go into all the world? So that's my question.
Great question. Great question. Interestingly enough, many, many years ago, we set aside a fund of 3 months in case our church burned down or I went apostate or whatever. Sure. We'd be able to support all of our missionaries for at least 3 months. We don't want to touch that reserve. Right now, our giving is still good, so we're still taking right out of that line item. But one of the things we're doing is we're sending all the missionaries newsletters, emails, different ways, saying, if you need to come home, you can come home. Don't feel bad, because they're in a pretty bad situation where they may not be able to get help if they get the virus. But we're staying in touch. We're continuing to support them at full level. Nothing has been cut. And I guess I would really encourage the church not to start hoarding at this time. You know, God blesses when we release. It is hard. You can't make the trips. I've got some trips that were canceled. All kinds of things have happened. But with the technology we've got today and the fact that some people still do have jobs and have got some money, let's be sacrificial and continue to give. You have no idea what God's going to do through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so often we get in this kind of crisis and we start looking inward We
Right.
turn our focus inward. How are you continuing to turn your focus outward?
Our outward focus, our head of our missions, Tony Pedroni, is in constant contact. As a matter of fact, I called Tony yesterday to give me kind of an update, how we're doing things. And of course, we're supporting people from, I think we have something like 250 missionaries. A lot of them, are nationals.
Sure.
But we give a lot all over. We're in constant contact. We know what the needs are. Right now, we're only giving to emergency needs. We've cut back because we know the giving is about to drop at some point. So we're being very, very careful with administrative costs and all those types of things. But nobody's lost any support. Everybody's still in good shape. I think we have one family coming home, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
They're coming home from Indonesia, but they've served there for years.
So you guys really are helping to focus your church in continuing to care for all the missionaries that you support.
Absolutely. Right now, I'm sending out every day. I go on with my cell phone and record about a 2.5 minute little video. Not all of them are about missions, but they have to do with the fact that we have really got to not see this as the only time that people have been quarantined in life.
Right.
I've been down the Amazon enough, and you've been down, but I remember years ago, the floodwaters come up about this time, and many people have to leave their living quarters, climb up on their roof, and live on their roof or in an attic situation. That's quarantine, and it's for 3 months. You look at the persecuted church in China. They're quarantined. They can't just go out and publicly do whatever they want. But it's interesting. The world is quarantined.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since Adam sinned, God banished them from the garden. He says, you're quarantined.
Wow, that's good.
And we're waiting for to be released from that quarantine. Of course, that's through the gospel, but ultimately, but even now, we ought to realize there is a quarantine in this world. It's trapped in sin and corruption and everything else. This is why we're here. We are here to be salt and light because the world is in darkness and decay. And if we lose that sight because we're hoarding and focusing only on us, we're going to miss it. We're going to miss a huge window.
That is so good. And in the South, we would say that right there will preach. Because, I mean, I haven't put together that until you just said it, that we, from the moment Adam and Eve left the garden, we have been quarantined. We're quarantined from our home. We're quarantined here. And yet, we can still thrive and flourish. And as you mentioned, the church in China being quarantined. What's happened to that church in China?
Oh, exploded. This is what we're seeing. Most of the places where there's a lot of pressure, stress, quarantine, it's like the Egyptians. The more they beat them with their taskmasters, the faster Israel grew. There's a principle here. And I think we can't lose this window. We can't be constantly thinking about how do I get out of this difficult situation? It's what does God want to teach me in this? How can we reach the world through this?
Mike, I love that. And it's so rich for church leaders that may be watching or believers, who are so concerned about what's going on, and that idea of, flourishing in the midst of this quarantine and how God can do that. So how is Restin basically really preparing believers and helping believers in your church to keep their heart open to the world globally and not just focused in on your church, but remain open? How does your church experience that?
Well, we're using a lot of Zoom, a lot of technology. Again, Tony is constantly putting things out to our body. If you go online, you can find different things about what's going on at Reston Bible Church. I don't know, only because we don't know when we're going to be able to get back,
Sure.
that we have done as good a job. Right now, there's just so much emergency needs. We just got finished feeding 150 families yesterday, Hispanic families that come to our church.
Wow.
So we also have a lot of local outreach.
Right.
That's another thing. We have lots of local outreach. We also give to above and beyond our 1.6 million that goes to the world. But some of the things I'm sending out, and then our just weekly services, there's almost always some sort of a sense of commitment to we're not the only people going through this. And if anything, because of what we have, I'm sitting here looking out over a beautiful field. I took a walk this morning. I can go down to the refrigerator. If anything, this should give me greater compassion for the world that's been living in a quarantine far longer than I have. Excuse me. Again, China or many different places, these people have been quarantined a good bit of their lives.
Sure, yeah.
And this should give me a far greater capacity to care and to think, if this is suffering, and I've got my computer here and my refrigerator right here and my books and everything else.
That's right.
If this is suffering, what is that they're going through? And I've been down there, I've seen it. I've climbed up on top of roofs, dropped bags of food in, gone down. I can't do much of that anymore at my age, but I can still do a little bit. So I've watched this, and then I come back here, and so often just going to a foreign country. I was in Haiti a while ago, and of course you and I were down in the Amazon. When I come back, those trips are a reminder to me of the compassion that Reston Bible Church and the churches of the United States need to be committed to in times of crisis and difficulty. This is not the time to back off.
That's right, Mike. That is so good, because in fact, kind of what I hear you saying is that during this quarantine, really our Great Commission call explodes. I mean, it goes through the roof. It becomes hotter and brighter as we're quarantined, because that's what the church does. We reach out and, share the love of Christ during times like these.
And I'll tell you something else. I really believe this. I believe if we hoard, we're going to lose God's blessing. I think if we give, I think God will do something supernatural in the church that does that. Right now, and I don't know how long this is going to last. We've been 5 weeks with no services.
Yeah.
Our giving last week and the week before was higher than it was a year ago these 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's higher.
Good Lord. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what in the world? How can that? We were expecting a 50% drop or 30 or 40%.
It's higher, and God's continuing to bless. Well, what word of encouragement would you give to pastors, leaders, believers that are watching this about all we've talked about, but what would you leave them with?
I think I would say that just my personal experience through the years in watching the church across the nation, watching the church in various parts of the world, that I think that every pastor, as the leader of the church, is going to have to take careful inventory of the funds. And this is easy for me to say because things are going well. Certainly there are little churches that you don't have much money.
Sure.
But whatever you can do, whatever that might is, that you can put in that box, I believe God is going to expand. I think he'll bless your church in ways that you can't imagine. It is not a time to think of just here. It's a time to think there, because the world has always been in quarantine. It always will be. This is something a little different, but not really. The world has experienced trouble like this all the time. So I would just encourage every leader, every pastor, keep giving and have a global focus rather than just a local focus.
And Mike, I so appreciate that encouragement. And I know that what you're saying is real and authentic. You're just not saying that via a video interview right now because you live that. That's just how you live in times when things are going great. Yeah. And, that's how you live even when things are bad. I mean, you just have such a generous heart, a global heart. And so I know that what you're saying is authentic and real, and I appreciate that very much.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. I am certainly no hero in this, but I've just seen too many times through the years when I thought the world was caving in, and then God just poured out his blessings I couldn't even understand. Amen. And I think he's going to do that in this. We just don't see it yet. But Amen. Hang in there and trust that God's going to do great work.